Jake, I heard you're starting Father's Day early today, surprisingly.
Yeah, my mom texted us that my brother just showed up at my grandma's. So we were supposed to do Father's Day tomorrow, but my mom gave everybody the wrong date.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So are you getting out of that because of the podcast, or are you going over there after?
No, I was just there. I threw ribs on the grill, so I'm going to go back right after this.
Wow.
A podcast about bourbon and the ones who drink it. This is Bourbon Matters. Welcome to Bourbon Matters. I'm Jake.
I'm Dan.
And I'm Jake from Gold Eagle, and we have my dad on the podcast today as a special guest for Father's Day weekend.
That's awesome. Nice to meet you, Steve.
Yep, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Happy Father's Day early.
Thank you. You too. Are you a father? Or?
Almost.
Soon, right?
Yeah, October.
Oh, a emerging father.
Yeah. Father in training, I guess.
Yeah.
God, you need a lot of training.
Yeah.
Better keep him out of your whiskey room.
Yeah, I know.
That's right.
Don't want that shelf to go tumbling over.
No.
For the sake of the kid and the whiskey.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I think we've got a lot of cool stuff to talk about. I think we've talked about this the first time you were on about your family story with the store. It's probably worth talking about again because I don't think we've mentioned that in a while.
Yeah, I mean, we should probably hear it from my dad's point of view. I don't know if you want to just go through just a quick your history with the store. I mean, what's it now,
Sure.
like 30 years you've been working there?
Yeah, I basically started working there in the mid to late 80s. And I've been there ever since. And but a quick history of the store. My grandfather and his uncle actually started it pre-prohibition. They were delivering and stuff illegally, but so they earned money. And from there, my grandfather took it over from his uncle. His uncle got thrown out of the state. He had to get far away because they didn't like to pay taxes. So my grandfather basically kept the store himself, and from there, my dad took it over in the late 50s and moved it out to open up a store in Mount Prospect in 73. He had to get away from the city and open up 2 more stores, Hoffman Estates in 74 and then Libbyville in 77.
Oh, nice.
And now we've got 4th generation going. Maybe the best generation of all.
We'll see. It's all couldn't do it without the one before, of course. But
It's been fun.
I don't know. I guess very fun.
It's a very fun.
I mean,
business to be in.
How long have you been working there, Jake? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I never sort of pushed it on them. Never at all pushed it on them. But and I didn't think they had any interest in it. But all of a sudden, when they graduated college, they both said, "I'm working here." I didn't,
yeah, honestly, growing up, I had no interest, no desire. I mean, I don't know. I feel like because it was liquor too, you kind of kept us away a little bit before we were 21. And then I moved out to California and was enjoying it out there. And then I think we talked on the phone one day, and 2 or 3 weeks later, I decided it was a good decision to move back and start working there full time. Didn't really have a plan or anything, just moved back and jumped right into it. Didn't know much at all about liquor except for just finding the cheapest handle at the local neighborhood liquor store.
That's probably might be the most unique thing about this situation is that I didn't know anything about. I didn't know how they make red wine. The first thing I heard is that you make red wine from red grapes. I didn't know that. When I'm 22 years old, I didn't know that. So I didn't know anything. I didn't want any part of this business. But then I got dragged in. I guess partly because my dreams fell apart making the PGA Tour. So I figure I might as well go to work in the family business, help out my dad.
And so you're a big golfer, or you were?
Yeah, I was. Yeah, unfortunately, when I was 33, I got MS, so that pretty much ended everything. But prior to that,
But he won the Illinois Amateur, was it?
yeah, Illinois State Amateur when I was
Played at
nice.
Ohio State
17.
and Texas A&M. So
That's pretty
Nice.
cool.
mm-hmm. So it was closer than like a wild dream to play in the PGA Tour, but
yeah.
I'm thankful that you.
I can pretty much toot my own horn that when I was 21, I was probably the top 20 players in the United States.
Oh wow!
Just based on results, because they didn't really have any rankings back then, but it was it's definitely realistic. But as I see things now, I'm glad it never happened. So it is crazy.
Yeah, I'm definitely glad too, because we might not be here on this podcast. We probably wouldn't be here on this podcast right now.
Probably.
Yeah.
So no, this is fun. This is really Jake and Brett have really opened my eyes to all these changes that have gone on, and the changes are tremendous. It's what's happened. And
what are some of the biggest changes you've seen since they've kind of taken the reins over?
Well, I think the biggest change is the amount of different products that are available. That I can probably think back to when I was beginning, and we only had 5 or 6 bourbons on the shelf. That's it. And that's all we cared about was, everybody was trying to sell half gallons. And, it's strictly based on price. You buy it for $20 and you sell it for $19.99. I thought that was a terrible business to be in, but so that has definitely changed. That's definitely changed because now we can, the laws have changed to allow distilleries to open up all over the place. And now we have a flood of products, which you couldn't do 50 years ago. You couldn't do that. So it's interesting that has happened. And I think boys are doing great.
And I mean, bourbon, going back even a little bit further, like bourbon wasn't even, it was kind of like a secondary item, right? Like vodka was the biggest item by far for liquor.
Right. For ourselves,
and as he mentioned, like,
right. The,
when did like bourbon, from your point of view, kind of take over? Like not how it is today, but when did you start to see like an uptick? Because I know there was a period where like nobody drank bourbon; it was just thought as like your grandfather's mixer drink, and like no young people drank bourbon. Do you remember when that kind of changed? I mean, this had to have been before I started working there 6 years ago.
It's definitely. I mean, when I started in the late '80s, bourbon was still not we sold. I could probably say 70% of what we sold was vodka, and then probably in Jake was born in the '90s. It still was vodka. It did switch over until probably like when you were 10 years old, something like that. So right around 2000.
It's like early 2000s, 2005.
Early 2000s, yeah. I mean, that's a short market. I mean, talking about 2005 to now, that's like 16, 17 years. And all those years before that, we didn't sell any vodka. I mean, we didn't sell any whiskey at all. it was Jim Beam half gallons, and 10 High was big, and Early Times. Early Times was when Early Times was called a bourbon, and Early Times that this probably says or exemplifies how bourbon fell apart or was not popular. That Early Times changed their name from Kentucky Straight Bourbon to some sort of whiskey. I mean, because they can make more money. They didn't have to go with the Kentucky Straight Bourbon laws, so it's cheaper. They can put out a cheaper,
probably younger, mixing in like 1-year-old.
Right. Yeah, and I thought that was at that point was, I don't know, why would they do that? But I guess they were smarter. They weren't smarter than us, but they killed that brand.
Well, also the consumer didn't really care as much. I mean, nowhere near how educated people are today, and like how much they care about the quality and everything that's going into the process of making bourbon.
Yes. Right. I mean, look at just we got 4 of us right here talking about bourbon. That didn't happen 50 years ago.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, like the rise of the internet had to have like a major impact on the industry overall, right?
Yeah. Right. Yeah, it's all
just the amount of information available, and
and COVID changed things too. Sitting at home, what are you going to do? You look on the internet and you see bourbon, and maybe I should try this. And it grew. I mean, it grew really fast. So just it was probably big in the 20s. I don't really have any proof of that, but I would imagine whiskey was pure. I think whiskey was very early 20s or before, and then for 20, 30 years it didn't grow at all. Probably lost brands. 15 years, 20 years, it's just exploded. So it's interesting. It's really sorry.
I guess the one nice thing of owning a store back then is you didn't have to worry about people coming in and asking if you have any special whiskeys in the back all the time.
That did not happen. It's still
as a matter of fact. Go ahead.
No, it still amazes me today how many people walk in and you can tell they don't know anything about. They don't drink, or they just drink a little bit, but they go to the bourbon aisle and ask for, I think Eagle Rare, Buffalo Trace. Those are like the 2 biggest things I hear all the time from the average person that really doesn't know anything about. Probably doesn't know anything about whiskey.
Blanton's, yeah,
Blanton's, right.
I mean, you can tell because people who are really, really into it and actually drink know that a lot of that stuff is very overrated, and there's plenty of options to explore just sitting right on the shelf. We probably talk about it at least once an episode,
right.
Taters, but it's kind of a good transition when so we kind of got the bourbon booming at our store back before I got involved with our Buffalo Trace store picks. I remember you telling me stories about how when they pitched you on, do you want to pick a barrel of Buffalo Trace? Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, that really wasn't happening. Maybe Benny's was doing it or something like that, but
we don't say that name on the podcast, but keep going.
So, I mean, maybe they were doing it, but I don't know for sure. But I had a salesman that worked for Buffalo Trace, and he said, you guys are starting to buy a little bourbon, which we were starting to pick up a little bit, and he said, why don't you come down here and pick out a barrel? And I knew nothing about the process. I never even heard of that, but went down there and actually we tasted 5 barrels. They rolled them out from the brick house, and There's two of them that I couldn't. That were really good. So here I am. We've never picked a barrel, and I'm walking out of there with two of them, thinking, God, my dad's gonna kill me and just spent $10,000. But they sold. They sold, and they've been selling ever since. And now finally, and then probably 15 years later or 10 years later, they cut us off. They start saying you can't have. Originally it was all you want. Then it was 6 barrels a year. Then it was 4 barrels a year. Now it's, I don't know, Jake. Was it 2 barrels a year?
It's like 3 barrels from them a year. I think we might be able to do an extra one this year, but only one Buffalo Trace barrel. But even like 6 years ago, I remember when I started working, and we would pick a barrel of Buffalo Trace. We would get it in. Usually would take 3, 4, maybe 5 or 6 months to sell through it. And as soon as we got down to like 3 or 4 cases, we would just ask them for samples. They would send us samples. We would pick another one. And then the next barrel would come in by the time we sold out of those last 3, 4 cases. And I mean, now Buffalo Trace barrel is gone in 2 hours.
Right.
Limit 1 bottle per person. So it's just in the last 6 years, there's been so much change with that.
Right.
But yeah, I remember just you talking about how the first time they asked you to pick a barrel, you thought it was kind of crazy to buy one whole barrel. But it's very cool that we were one of the first stores, definitely, I think probably one of the first independents to start doing barrel picks.
Right.
And I mean, I'm sipping on Buffalo Trace right now because I knew we were going to talk about this. This is our 41st single barrel that we picked. And I think we have 42 coming next week. Give a little hint to those who are listening.
I think there was a problem with the numbering too, so I think.
You think we got?
We're on it.
Oh wow! And then I remember you also saying that you kept one of each up until maybe about barrel 20, and then just decided one day, what's all this bourbon doing sitting here? Like, let's just put it on the shelf and get rid of it.
Yeah, that was
Because how cool would that have been to put up a display of one of every Gold Eagle barrel picks of Buffalo Trace?
Yeah, I had them in the office, and then one day it was we didn't have any on the shelf. We didn't have any access to it. And I just said to myself, why just put those? Why am I holding these things? And I put them out, and it sold that day. It was quick. But I'm not a.
It's got to be crazy.
I'm not a.
Go ahead, Steve.
Saver. I don't. I sort of do with wine, but I haven't done it with whiskey. So.
You can tell just from looking at Jake's background that he's not a saver either. He drinks every single bottle he buys.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it's for, right?
I'm trying to find people that I can pawn stuff off on.
Yeah, I mean, he does. Like, I'll be honest, like, a lot of my barrel picks that I really enjoy, I do put a bottle or two aside. I don't know, come back to it in 10 years and remember picking that barrel and being able to tell a story, I think is going to be very cool. Or to put it on the bar and do like a vertical flight is very cool. And my dad is always like, let's just sell it. Let's just get the money. But I think especially recently I think you're kind of coming on board to the fact that, yes, this is a booming category right now, and it's still kind of in its beginning phases. Like, there's still a lot more room to grow just with how many new people are getting into it.
Definitely. I don't see an end in sight, but
Mm-hmm.
It just, it's, as I said, it's me. It was all vodka, and then at some point, I think vodka started dying out, and I think bourbon just moved in, and I mean, bourbon blows it away now. I mean, we probably sell, what do you think, 80% of what we sell is bourbon now.
Yeah, I think so.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
That just leads into the unique thing with bourbon and whiskey, though, is talking about saving some of these bottles and barrel picks that you're doing and trying them 10, 15 years down the road. It's you don't get that with many other spirits. I mean, no one's holding on to a bottle of Belvedere for 20 years.
No.
It's there's very few spirits that you can talk about longevity with, and wanting to sit down and have a memory drink with them. It's pretty sweet.
But do you guys think that it changes in the bottle? Because I always believe that
No.
it doesn't change in the bottle at all. Wine.
No, it's not going to change in the bottle, but it's going to change. I mean, the way they make it is going to change. I mean, people say all the time they don't make them like they used to, and there's a whole market for old dusty bottles, like even just regular Wild Turkey 101, old bottles of Old Granddad from the 80s and 90s that you can still find, bottom shelf pints, half pints full of dust. And those taste 10 times better than what Old Granddad is putting out today. Not that Old Granddad's bad, but just the quality of stuff that they had.
Can we be nice? I'm drinking that right now.
Yeah, I'm being nice. I didn't mean it like that. But the quality is just not the same. And a lot of the distilleries will say, because we're losing the human touch. A lot of the distilling now is computerized, and you're pressing buttons and you're not actually making the cuts by hand. And, it makes a big difference in what we're drinking today. And even the trees too, that they're cutting down for the barrels aren't living as long, and that's affecting the bourbon too.
Mm-hmm.
They're chopping down younger trees to use for oak barrels now. So a lot of different factors that, can make, who knows, maybe in 15 years now, the bourbon's going to be better. But I think it's cool to have that vintage factor to be able to taste the same whiskey from 10 years apart and just see the difference.
I thought it was interesting at the Filey Bay tasting. What was the owner's name?
David Thompson.
Yeah, David was saying that they're in the next couple decades, they're probably going to run out of peat in Scotland, and they're going to have to figure out a way to kind of create an alternate way of getting that flavor into the barley, which was something I had never heard before. But it was super interesting because we're facing a similar problem with American oak, where, there's only a limited supply of these old trees to make these excellent barrels. And over time, we're going to deplete that way faster than we'll be able to replace them.
Another quick story I have, that first trip I went down to Buffalo Trace, we went to, there's a horse track right by there that we went to, that Buffalo Trace was sponsoring that, one of the races. And so we had this really nice room on the track, and Elmer T. Lee was there.
Oh, wow.
And he was talking about older whiskeys, and the one thing that he was disappointed in is that as a distiller, when you make the whiskey, it takes 12 or 18 years to see what happens to it. So he passed away probably 5 years after that, so he never got to see a lot of the stuff that he made at the end. So he never got to change, so in his lifetime, saying every 10 years to get a barrel to go, to mature. And then you got to wait another. So if you don't like what happens, make some changes, and then you got to wait another 10 years to see what's going on. So it's a really slow process.
Yeah, some of the
that's a cool
great
story.
master distillers had 50-year careers, probably, so they could stretch out as long as possible to taste the different iterations.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and
I never knew you met Elmer T. Lee.
So 50-year. So if he was, just the master distiller for 50 years, he probably only got to change whatever changes he wanted. He only got to change it about 5 times in his career.
Yeah.
All right, so I got something to share. I was trying to find the actual booklet, but I couldn't find it. But luckily, I have some pictures on my phone of the first ever Gold Eagle Whiskey Fest. I don't
Oh, yeah.
know, I don't know when this was. What do you think, Dad? 15, 20 years ago?
Yeah, I mean, it's got it probably in the early 2000s.
Early 2000s. Um, so in this booklet is all the things from the tasting. And everything was being tasted out, and everything was also for sale that day. So I'm going to read off some of them. So the first table was Old Forester, and they were pouring birthday bourbon. Next table was Buffalo Trace. They were pouring Blanton's, Eagle Rare, Elmer T. Lee, Weller 7-year-old Special Reserve. I guess it had an age statement back then. Weller 107, Weller 12 year. Highland Park was there pouring Highland Park 30 year, which is probably a couple $1,000 a bottle now. In Yamazaki 12 year was $60. Yamazaki 18 year was $80, and now they're 160 and 500 and impossible to find.
Yeah,
So that was our
good
first
rate.
whiskey fest. They were pouring all the good stuff. I think George Stagg was in there too. I didn't have pictures of that page, but I'm pretty sure that was in the booklet as well.
Sounds like tater heaven.
Well, this is. I mean, think about it. They had to go out and taste this stuff out to get people to buy it. That's just how it was 15
Right.
years ago. Imagine having
Yeah.
a time machine and going and filling up a
Back,
couple of storage units.
Whenever I hear about whiskey tasting these days and you hear that they're going to have a Sazerac rep there or things like that, I just feel so sorry for that Sazerac rep, just knowing that people are just coming up with empty glasses, just holding them out, just not even saying words like, poor.
Yeah, when
You know?
even 5 years ago when we did our big whiskey Wednesday nights, the Sazerac table would have a line throughout like
Yeah.
half the store, and every other table you could just walk right up and get a pour.
Right. It was crazy.
Yeah,
I went to the first whiskey tasting in Chicago with the I think the Wine Spectator. I think that they have a whiskey compound to the
just
Wine
a
Spectator.
big annual whiskey fest.
Yeah, and it was one of the first ones, and Julian Van Winkle was tasting. He was pouring out his 12-year-old, and he had the other couple items too. Imagine that.
So that brings up a cool story about how Van Winkle used to just sit on our shelves, and you had to put it on sale to move through it and get rid of it. I mean,
Right.
talk about the first time the first rep came in and asked or pitched you on the Van Winkle line, like what you thought. Did we bring it in right away, and how did it do?
Well, it was Union Liquors, which doesn't exist anymore, was the Chicago distributor for it, and they only got it once a year. I think they only, or no, they might have had it a couple times a year, the release of the Van Winkle stuff. But when I first saw it, I had never heard of it. I wasn't even excited about putting it in, but put it in and still it went on the bottom shelf with all the other bourbons and didn't sell at all. But it creeped out. It crept out there a little bit, but I think there must have been people that really knew what it was back then. But um, it didn't. It didn't do very well compared to other products.
But wasn't it, even at the time, wasn't it one of the more expensive bourbons on the shelf?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was definitely a little bit. Yeah, but not. I mean, they weren't that much back then. So I mean, maybe $5 more than everything else. But so it wasn't. It wasn't. Crazy pricing like it is now. It's like a few dollars more to get that. They were all like inexpensive to start with. So, I mean, probably sold the Van Winkle stuff for $20 in that range, maybe a little bit more.
Wow. And I mean, when you first brought it in, could you actually order it, or was it always, here, we have this many bottles for you, do you want them?
For the, are you talking about the
Like no, all the Van Winkle
Just
stuff.
regular-
Like when it
regular.
first came out, when you first brought it into the store, like was it something you can order more, or was it always allocated from the very beginning?
There's a period of time when you could order it, but it didn't last. It wasn't a year round. It wasn't open year.
So it was just a couple months where the distributor got some, and you can order it
right
whenever you wanted.
Right. But you could have ordered more, and I didn't order more because I didn't think it was, nobody was buying it, so why should I order more? At one point we had the Van Winkle, the Special Reserve 12-year-old, as Jake mentioned earlier, stacked on the floor. It was on, the end of one of the end caps, and I had to point people to that thing. Whenever they wanted something special, I'd say, this is what everybody wants. And it was still hard to give away. It sat there forever. I don't know if we want to go
How quickly
23-year-old story, but
yeah, we'll definitely get into that. But how quickly did it change? Do you remember going through that time period where did you ever think like maybe I should be buying more and saving some of this, or
as my instincts are always, I don't want to load up the basement. I want to sell things, and if I could buy it, if I can keep buying it, why would I throw it in the basement? So, but it did. I don't remember exactly, but probably in the 90s or late 90s, early 2000s. That's when it sort of started to go. The regular Van Winkle stuff started selling off the shelf. Then we were stuck. Then we were limited to once year release, and November used to come out, and we always had it in January. For sure. So we never sold through what our application was. And
all right, time for the Van Winkle 23-year Christmas story.
Well, we were. I had a salesman from my salesman from Sazerac was always trying to load me up on the aged Van Winkle products, and I didn't. I was taking them just because he kept telling me that these are going to be worth something, or that people are going to want them someday, and so I actually loaded up on the 23-year-olds one time, and I can go down in the basements, and I could see how it was stacked probably 5 feet high, and they were 3-packs.
All of the 23-year.
All 23-year-old, and couldn't get rid of it. I mean, and so I'm looking at the end of December. I always go around and look in the basement, see what I'd like to get rid of, and I would write a little list. So when customers come in, I said, I want to sell this stuff. And 23-year-old. So we're coming to Christmas Eve, and we're having a good day, but these two guys were right around the bourbon aisle, and they were asking about they didn't really know what 23-year-old was, but they were looking at it, and they were on their phones talking to their buddies, and I said I have like 6 cases of this 23-year-olds. What is it? Maybe $50 a bottle, or maybe less. But they ended up taking it all, and it was like a $3,000-$4,000 sale. And It was I was excited. I was excited to get rid of it, and I was excited to sell it, and now I'm kicking myself. Giving it away.
You sold it for $3,000 or $4,000 for all of it, and it would go for that per bottle nowadays.
Right.
Yeah. But at the time, it was a great sale. Like I remember you saying how you ran upstairs to your dad and was so proud to tell him that you just made a $3,000 or $4,000 sale. And I mean, can't really blame you because at the time there was no secondary market, so nobody knew, and bourbon was so new on becoming, a popular drink. But yeah.
The funniest part of that to me is that the sales guy was like begging you to buy it from him.
Yes. Yeah, that right. You gotta take this stuff. And I was, I didn't want to spend money when I didn't have to. So,
you know what? But good on that sales guy for having the vision of, hey, this is going to be worth something someday. He was ahead of the curve.
He was definitely a bourbon guy. He was just a sales guy. Right, that could be that. But he liked bourbon because he was the first one to do a bourbon class for me. So he set up a screen. He pulled up one of those portable screens, and he had a little movie projector, and they were showing pictures of Buffalo Trace, and he went through the whole presentation of what it takes to become bourbon. Whatever, it's 51% corn, it's got to be new oak, and all that. And so I mean that's all totally new to people back then.
The
So
first Gold Eagle Masterclass.
Right. Yeah, it was about 45 minutes. We cleared out we actually did it in the beer aisle, and people loved it. People liked it. That was a while ago. I wish I would have saved the when that was, but I can probably figure it out. But first masterclass.
Yeah, or if there was pictures, that would be pretty cool. Yeah, first masterclass. I didn't even know about that.
Yeah. See, I'm ahead of you, Jake. I did these things before you.
I know. I mean, I give you credit for the bar. The bar was your idea all along.
Yes, but
you wanted to put in the bar, and your dad didn't let you.
He said no. Right, I had it all drawn out, and I probably still have it on my computer. But I had estimated it'd be about $10,000 or $12,000 to put it in, and he said no way. And then he passed away, and the next year after that, we did it. With Jake's,
when you put it in, was your thought mainly for beer for that, or what was the main reason for the bar?
No, it was definitely a tasting. It was
okay.
I thought it would be just a tasting bar, and we didn't have the license to sell at that point either. So we could do a tasting bar, but we couldn't sell the product. So we kept accumulating all these bottles, and what are we going to do with these bottles? So I figured let's have a bar, and on the back wall we put all the bottles there. When somebody wanted to try something, we give them a little. We walked around.
So what
gave people?
Yeah, what he's talking about is like even before we put in the actual bar, we used to have a shelf with like I don't know, it's probably 50 to maybe up to 80 at sometimes bottles open that reps would just leave with us. They would come and do tastings. They would leave the rest of the bottle, and people in the store, we would sample out, whatever they wanted as they were walking in the aisles. So we kind of been doing the try before you buy for a long time. But then we finally just put in a formal actual bar area, obviously, that just makes it a lot nicer experience for the consumer to be able to have a seat, drink out of a Glencairn, instead of just on a plastic cup walking around the store.
And you were with me when we went to the mayor. I don't know if you went to a meeting with the mayor in Libertyville, and we pitched the idea.
Oh yeah,
changing the law, and he was all for it and did it.
He was very. I mean, we were a little nervous. We thought it was gonna be a long meeting, and it was like less than 5 minutes. He was like, yeah, if this is going to help your guys' business, then for sure. You've been there since 1980, so got a good relationship with you guys. So that was very cool. I thought for Libertyville to be that supportive of us.
Right.
But yeah, when we did put in the bar officially, which was probably 4 or 5 years ago, there was 8 whiskeys, and we had the 6 taps, but there was just 8 spirits. And I don't think I didn't even think it would grow into. I think now we have like 180 bottles open on the bar. And I kind of always envisioned it just being like, all right, just 10 things, 10 to 15, like really cool things for people to taste. But I think just the bourbon explosion really kind of helped catapult that to, what it is now. And honestly, I feel like you don't really have a choice anymore if you really want to be successful, because the consumer, there's so much stuff out there they want to try. They want to, they want to taste before they buy. There's a lot of stuff, a lot of new distilleries, and people, don't have the money to buy everything now. So you gotta taste it and see what you like.
Yeah.
I'm still just blown away that the government was easy to work with.
I mean, that's what we thought going into that.
Yeah. Right. I'm sure there's plenty of towns out there that still don't allow it.
Yeah, for sure.
We got lucky with Libertyville.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's talk about what we're drinking. So Jake already talked about this Buffalo Trace barrel pick. Any other notes on that one?
So this is barrel 41. It's I think it's the most recent one that we've done, and you really, with most of these Buffalo Trace picks, you just can't go wrong. 90 proof, easy drinker, good one to start with for the day. My dad always gives me crap about drinking the 130 proof, barrel proof stuff, but it is nice to go back to a nice, easy drinker. And being 8 years old, it's got a lot of complexity at the 90 proof, and this is one that I think holds a special place in our heart because it was the first barrel pick that we did, and that was the first Kentucky trip that I ever went on when my dad and my brother and I went down to Buffalo Trace to pick out a barrel. So I think that trip really opened my whole eyes to what we can really do with these barrel picks. So I had to drink Buffalo Trace for this episode.
Nice. So what's your go-to, Steve?
I as Jake mentioned, I'm not a fan of, maybe it's my generation of high proof items. I understand that, there's more flavor in there's more, but I think if you put a drop of water in there in your glass, and it really opens things up, and it's easier to drink. So I don't, what Jake's doing is totally fine. What people that like high proof alcohol, go at it. But so I am drinking just a Eagle Rare at a 10-year-old,
and he's a big Eagle Rare fan.
Yeah. Oh, okay. It's a good choice.
Does he have to come in and ask you if you have it in the back, Jake, for him?
This is hilarious, actually. When we released the last Eagle Rare barrel, he texted me after, like 30 minutes after I posted it. He's like, "Hey Jake, please save me one."
See what I have to go through?
Yeah, it's your store. I'll save you one. So yeah, I mean, and I was just gonna say, I know you don't really drink bourbon too often, so like one bottle Eagle Rare will sit at your house for a couple years, unless we're over often, then we'll dive into it. But I know you also love Irish whiskey is kind of like your go-to.
Yeah, it's always been because I did start liking Scotch at one point, but then I didn't like the peat, so Irish whiskey really has no peat. So Irish whiskey is pretty smooth, and I actually got a vintage Jameson bottle, 2007.
Nice,
Smooth, my style. So I will drink to that.
Yeah. What about
Sweet.
you guys?
Dan, you
You
want
got
to
a
go?
little fancy. I
I see
don't know,
that
Jake. I
old
want to hear
granddad
about that
back there.
fancy
I
cocktail.
hear about my
Yeah.
cocktail that I made 5
Is
minutes
that
before the
is that a
episode.
flower?
No, it's mint.
Oh.
I had to cut. I knew we had a mint plant somewhere, but we're having our deck rebuilt, so I had no idea where it was. So I had to run around the whole house looking for the mint plant. But yeah, I made a bourbon smash. So you take a couple lemon wedges and smash them in the bottom of the glass with a couple mint leaves. And then it's just 2 ounces of bourbon and 3/4 of an ounce of simple syrup. And I'm using Watershed Bottled in Bond as my bourbon.
Mm.
So
Nice.
I thought that was the hazmat back there.
that would have been a bold move.
That would have been a very bold move.
The lemon would just be gone at that point.
A complete smoothie.
Yeah.
Just disintegrate.
Yeah, I like the Watershed Bottled in Bond as like a cocktail base. I like to use a little bit higher proof whiskey in my cocktails, so that, especially if it's going to be mixed with ice, because as it waters down, you keep some of the whiskey flavor in there. So
Yeah,
like 100 proof is usually what I like to use.
Nice. Well, in honor of Father's Day, I'm drinking Old Granddad 114. Had been wanting one for a while, but DeKalb doesn't seem to get it in very often. So luckily, I was up at a nice liquor store in Libertyville over the week, and they had some on the shelf. So I picked up my Old Granddad 114 for Father's Day. My dad is actually going to be here probably in about 20 minutes for Father's Day. We're doing some stuff in the city, so. Speaking about all the pappy, I think I will just thinking of the documentary Neat with my dad being here. He's 70 now, so I think we'll have a little pour of pappy today for Father's Day before we go out and go to the city tomorrow. So that'll be our little night tonight.
Nice. That's very nice.
I gave my dad Pappy 12 on Christmas, and he said it's the most disgusting thing he's ever tasted. Then he went back to
Is he a
drinking
bourbon
Bud
drinker?
Light. No, he drinks Bud Light exclusively.
Gotcha.
See,
it's hilarious.
My dad will try and take credit for getting me into whiskey, which he didn't, but I'll let him have it because after my grandpa passed away, they found a bottle of Gentleman Jack at my grandparents' place. So he gave me that. I wasn't drinking that. I was drinking Makers, but I'll let him have it. But for Father's Day a couple of years ago, we met up in Marengo at Sam's Bar because he has Pappy for pours there. And my dad's into whiskey. He's gotten more into it over the last couple of years. But he wasn't a big fan of drinking straight whiskey. It was always with Coke. And for Father's Day a couple of years ago, I got him a pour of Pappy. And I'm like, you're just going to try this neat and just see what you think. And he took a sip of it. He's like, oh, this is good whiskey. Why don't they all taste like this? So we'll do that tonight. But.
Nice.
Cool. Any other stories before we
yeah, any other stories, final thoughts?
I think I've cleared out my head on a lot of things.
Well, Steve, just think that all your hard work means that Jake gets to sample a couple hundred different barrels of whiskey every year and make a few picks. So I'm sure he's hating you for having to do that all the time now.
It's a rough gig.
It's I guess one of the advantages, but then when I come home 32 minutes in a day, it's not the greatest. but you got it. I always tell them you got to know what you sell.
Mm-hmm.
That's his famous line. Got to know what you sell.
Mm-hmm. I like it. All right. On that note, I think we'll say cheers.
Cheers, Steve. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
Happy Father's Day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thanks. Happy Father's Day.
Maybe I'll come back another day.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds
All
good.
right.
All right, guys. Enjoy Father's Day tomorrow or
Wait, what about
yesterday. Or no,
We're gonna
today.
plug
Oh, plugs.
today
yeah.
or tomorrow.
Plugs.
Mhm.
Today.
But
It'll be
yeah.
today, right? Yeah.
Find us at goldeaglewine.com, on Instagram, Gold Eagle Wine, Facebook, Gold Eagle Spirits, and download our app on the Apple Store or Google Play Store. And Bourbon Matters.
Bourbon Matters. You can find us at Bourbon Matters on Instagram and Facebook. Listen to us on Spotify and watch us on Spotify and YouTube, or listen wherever podcasts are listenable.
Awesome.
Listenable. Awesome.
Listenable.
Yeah.
All right.
All right.
Cool.
Cheers, guys.
Happy Father's
Talk to
Day,
you
all.
guys later.
Happy Father's Day.
Cheers.
Cheers, everybody.